They laughed when Harland Moss walked through the front door of Whitfield Capital Management carrying a grocery bag. Not a briefcase, not a portfolio. A brown paper grocery bag folded at the top, the kind you get from the corner store when you buy 2 pounds of chicken and a bottle of hot sauce. The receptionist, a young woman named Brianna with acrylic nails and a headset she never seemed to actually use, looked up from her desk and let her eyes travel from the bag to his worn leather shoes, up the length of his frame, and settle somewhere around his collar with the particular expression of someone who has already decided what they're looking at before they've finished looking. "Can I help you?" she said. The words were right. The tone was not. Harland Moss set the grocery bag down on the counter and said, "I have a 9 o'clock with Sutton." Brianna blinked. "Excuse me." Raymond Sutton, managing partner. He looked at his watch. A Timex, the kind with the Velcro band, the kind a man wears when he stopped caring about impressing people a long time ago. 9 o'clock, on 2 minutes early. She made him wait anyway. 37 minutes. He counted. He sat in the chair closest to the door, the one with a slight wobble in the left leg, and he did not pull out his phone. He did not fidget. He had spent 41 years learning how to wait in rooms that didn't want him there, and he had gotten very good at it. What Brianna did not know, what almost nobody in that building knew, was that Harland Moss had been hired 3 weeks prior to walk into Whitfield Capital Management and find out why they were losing money. Not a little money. Not the kind of quarterly dip that gets smoothed over in a PowerPoint presentation with a lot of blue charts and optimistic language about market headwinds. Real money. The kind that makes partners stop returning each other's phone calls. The kind that makes a firm's senior accountant develop a sudden interest in early retirement. Harland ran a consulting practice out of a 2-room office above a dry cleaner in Baltimore. No logo on the door. No website worth mentioning. Just a phone number and a reputation that traveled the way all real reputations travel. Quietly, by word of mouth, from one boardroom to the next. You hired Harland Moss when you were past the point of fixing things yourself and too proud to admit it to anyone else. Raymond Sutton had called him on a Tuesday evening, voice low, the way men get when they're scared and don't want to sound scared. They'd met once, years ago, at a conference in Atlanta. Sutton remembered. Harland barely did. "I need someone who can come in, look at everything, and tell me what's broken," Sutton had said. Quietly. Quietly costs extra, Harland had told him. I know. The arrangement was simple. Harland would come in as a contract analyst. No announcement, no formal introduction. He would observe. He would review. He would report directly to Sutton, and only Sutton. In the meantime, he would look exactly like what the building assumed he was. Somebody's driver. Somebody's maintenance man. Somebody who had wandered off the street and found himself somewhere he didn't belong. He had done this before, more times than he could count. The man who finally came to escort him back was not Raymond Sutton. He was younger, late 30s, the kind of thin that comes from skipping lunch on purpose, with a lanyard around his neck that said Pike, L. Lidit, Essienier and Lillist. He held a tablet in one hand and looked at Harland with the expression of someone who has been sent to do a task they find mildly beneath them. "Mister." He glanced at the tablet. "Moss?" "That's right. Ray asked me to get you settled. He's running behind." Elliot Pike turned and started walking before Harland had fully stood up. "You'll be in the 3rd floor bullpen. We've got a workstation set up. Access to the shared drive, obviously, but the restricted folders you'll need to request through compliance. That process usually takes about 4 days," Harland said, walking beside him now. "Unless you know someone in IT, then it's about 40 minutes. Elliot Pike looked at him sideways. "You've done this before. Once or twice." They got in the elevator. 2 other men were already inside, both white, both in the particular shade of navy blue that seemed to be the firm's unofficial uniform. They were in the middle of a conversation, and they finished it without acknowledging that anyone else had entered the elevator, the way people do when they're certain they're the only ones worth acknowledging. "Ryland's numbers are going to get him fired before Q3, one of them said. "Ryland's numbers have been wrong since February, the other one said. "The question is why nobody caught it." The elevator opened on 3. Harland walked out. He didn't say anything. He filed the name away. Ryland. The third-floor bullpen was exactly what it sounded like. An open floor plan with too much fluorescent light and not enough privacy. The kind of workspace designed by someone who read an article about collaboration and took it personally. Rows of low partitions, monitors back to back, the low hum of people pretending to work while actually watching each other work. When Harland Moss walked in behind Elliot Pike, the pretending stopped. It wasn't dramatic. Nobody threw anything. Nobody said a word. It was just the specific, invisible silence that happens when something enters a room that the room has not prepared itself for. Heads came up, eyes tracked, conversations developed sudden pauses. Elliot Pike walked him to a corner workstation, smaller than the others, with a monitor that was visibly older, the kind with the thick back end that hadn't been standard issue in about a decade. He set the tablet down on the desk and said, "This is you. Passwords on the sticky note. IT will be by to set up your credentials." Then he left. Harland sat down. He did not look around. He pulled the brown paper grocery bag onto his lap, opened it, and took out a legal pad, 2 pens, and a small plastic container of roasted almonds. He put the pens in the cup holder that was already on the desk. He put the almonds to the left of the keyboard. He put the legal pad in front of him, wrote the date at the top, and underlined it. Then he looked at the monitor. Then he looked at the room. Nobody was looking at him anymore, but the quality of the not looking was its own kind of attention. A man 2 rows over, nameplate said Dexter Crow, Portfolio Manager, leaned toward the woman at the desk beside him and said something in a voice low enough to require leaning but not low enough to be actually private. The woman, sim on a card, fixed in comb, glanced in Harland's direction and pressed her lips together in a way that could have meant anything. Harland opened his legal pad to a fresh page and wrote, Crow. Achard. Note the dynamic. He was not angry. He had stopped getting angry about this particular thing somewhere around 1997. What he was paying attention. The first week, Harland did not say much to anyone. He asked for documents through the proper channels. He sat through 2 all-hands meetings where he was introduced, briefly and without enthusiasm, as a contract support resource. He ate lunch at his desk, always from the grocery bag, always something that required no heating, and he read quarterly reports, internal memos, the kind of emails that people send when they think they're only being read by the person they're sending them to. Dexter Crow made a comment on Wednesday about the almonds, something about how they smelled. He said it to the woman beside him, but loud enough to land where it was meant to land. Harland wrote it down, not because it hurt, because it was information. What he was beginning to understand, what the files were starting to show him, in the slow, patient way that numbers always eventually tell the truth, was that Whitfield Capital's losses were not random. They were not market-related. They were not the result of bad luck or poor timing or any of the comfortable explanations that get offered in crisis meetings to spare everyone the discomfort of assigning blame to a specific human being. They were the result of Dexter Crow. Not all at once. Not in any single dramatic moment. The way a building develops a leak, slowly, in a place nobody's checking, until one day the ceiling caves in and everyone acts surprised. Crow had been moving money. Not stealing it, exactly, nothing that crude. Rerouting it, categorizing it differently, burying certain losses inside other line items, spreading them thin enough across enough accounts that no single audit would catch the full picture. You had to hold all of it at once, the way you hold a map, stepping back far enough to see how the roads connect. Harland had held maps like this before. By Thursday of the first week, he had 3 pages of notes in his legal pad. By Friday, 7. He was not ready yet. Ready was not about having enough. Ready was about being certain. Harland had learned the hard way what happens when you bring a case before it's airtight. You become the story instead of the evidence. He had been the story before. He was not interested in being the story again. It was the second week when Elliot Pike started watching him, not the way Crow watched him, dismissively, from a distance, with the particular incuriosity of a man who has already decided what something is. Elliot Pike watched him the way a person watches something they can't quite categorize, with a slight frown, a second glance, the furrowed attention of someone whose assumptions are producing friction. On Tuesday, Pike stopped at his workstation and stood there for a moment before speaking. "What are you actually looking at?" he said. "Reconciliations," Harland said without looking up. "Q1 and Q2, the ones in the Meridian sub-account." A pause. "Why Meridian?" "Because nobody else is." Another pause, longer this time. Then, "Those files are restricted. I got access Friday morning." Harland looked up at him then. Calm, direct. 40 minutes. "I know someone in IT." Elliot Pike stood there for a moment with his tablet held against his chest like a shield. Then he walked away without saying anything else. The next morning, he stopped again. This time, he didn't say anything. He just looked at the legal pad. All those pages, covered in the careful, dense handwriting of a man who has been doing this for 40 years. And something in his face changed. Harland didn't offer anything. He didn't need to. He had learned that the right information, delivered too early, lands wrong. It lands as threat instead of fact. He needed Elliot Pike to get there himself. He needed someone inside this building to start asking questions before he brought answers. Because what Harland Moss was building was not just a finding. It was a record. It was a chain. Every link had to be solid before the whole thing could hold weight. Raymond Sutton finally called him on Thursday of the second week. Late, after most of the building had emptied out, the particular quiet of an office at 7 in the evening when the air conditioning hums at a lower frequency and the cleaning crew hasn't arrived yet. "Tell me where you are," Sutton said on the phone, not in person. Harland had noticed this about him. Sutton communicated best through glass, through a screen, through a phone, through a wall. Face to face, he leaked too much. "I'm about 60%, Harland told him. 60% to what? To showing you exactly what happened, who did it, how, and for how long. The last 40% is making sure it'll hold in a room with lawyers." Silence on the other end. Then, "How long?" "End of next week, maybe sooner." "Do you know who it is?" Harland paused. He thought about the way Dexter Crow had said something about the almonds, the way he had looked at Harland's old monitor with a small, satisfied expression on the first day, the expression of a man who has arranged things and is pleased with the arrangement. The way he had, twice now, walked past Harland's desk with the comfortable unhurry of someone who does not believe they are being watched by anyone who matters. "Yes," Harland said, "I know who it is. And can you prove it? I will be able to." What broke things open? What always breaks things open, in Harland's experience, was not the big discovery. It was the small one. The thing so small that whoever built the problem didn't think to hide it, because they didn't think anyone was looking at that level. It was a single email, sent internally, 14 months ago. Dexter Crow to a woman named Paulette Sims in accounting, who had since left the firm. The email said, "Same as last quarter. You know what to do. Don't flag it." 5 words of instruction, 3 words of assumption, 2 words that, in context, changed everything. Harland sat with that email for a long time. He printed it, 1 copy, filed it in the legal pad behind 7 pages of notes, and he sat with it the way you sit with something that has settled a question you already knew the answer to. Not surprised, not triumphant, just still. He thought about Paulette Sims, wherever she was now. He thought about whether she had known what she was doing, or whether she had just done what she was told by a man with more authority than her, and told herself it wasn't her problem to understand. He thought about how many people had been standing close enough to this thing to feel its heat, and had made the decision, quietly, privately, to not ask about the source of it. He wrote at the bottom of the page, "Sims. Find out if she left voluntarily. Check separation agreement." Then he closed the legal pad and ate the rest of his almonds and looked at the empty office around him and thought, almost. It was Elliot Pike who walked into Raymond Sutton's office on Monday morning with a printed spreadsheet in his hand and a look on his face that said he had not slept. Harland was not in that meeting. He was at his workstation with the grocery bag and the legal pad and the old monitor, same as every other morning. But he heard about it the way you hear about things in an office. The particular change in atmospheric pressure when something has happened, the way conversations develop edges, the way people who have been ignoring you for 2 weeks suddenly find reasons to walk past your desk. Simone Achard stopped near his station around 11 and stood there for a moment looking at the wall, before saying, without quite looking at him, "You've been in the Meridian files." "I have," Harland said. "For how long?" "For how long? Since Friday of the first week." She turned and looked at him then, fully, the way people look when they're revising something. "And you didn't." She stopped, restarted. "What exactly are you here to do?" "Find what's broken," Harland said simply. "And document it." "For who?" "Sutton." She stood there for another moment. Then she said, very quietly, "Crow's been here 11 years. I know. He's on the compensation committee. I know that too." She looked at him, at the grocery bag, at the old monitor, at the legal pad with its dense pages of handwriting, and something in her face did what Elliot Pike's face had done, a small, visible recalibration. The expression of someone seeing a thing differently than they had been seeing it. She didn't apologize. Harland didn't need her to. Apologies were for relationships. This was work. "Is it solid?" she said. "It will be by Wednesday." She nodded once and walked away. The meeting was on Thursday. Not the full board. Sutton wasn't ready for that. Not yet, and Harland understood why. There are degrees of readiness when you're about to accuse an 11-year employee of systematically misdirecting firm capital, and Sutton was at the degree that needed one more layer of certainty before he could afford to be certain in public. It was Sutton and the firm's general counsel, a woman named Adrian Foote, who said nothing for the first 20 minutes and wrote in a leather notebook the entire time, and Elliot Pike, who sat against the wall with his arms crossed, and the look of a man who had been carrying something heavy and was about to put it down, and Harland Moss. He set the legal pad on the table. He did not have a presentation. He did not have a deck. He had 41 pages of handwritten notes, a printed email, and 17 months of reconciliation data annotated in red pen. He walked him through it. Not fast, not slow, the way you explain something when you need the other people in the room to not just understand it, but to be able to explain it themselves. He started with the Meridian subaccount. He moved to the Q1 reclassifications. He showed them how the numbers moved, where they went, what they were disguised as, and how the disguise worked. He showed them the email. Adrian Foote stopped writing at some point. She put her pen down and looked at the printed email and then looked at Harland and said, "When did you find this?" "Last Thursday evening." "And you waited until now?" "I needed to verify that Paulette Sims left voluntarily," he said. "She did not. There's a separation agreement. It has an NDA, standard language, but the timing is notable. She left 9 days after this email was sent." Foote looked at the email again. She looked at Sutton. Something passed between them that Harland was not part of and did not need to be. "This is," Sutton started. "Thorough," Foote said, and there was something in the word that was more than the word. She picked up her pen. "Mr. Moss, would you be available to meet with outside counsel next week?" "I'll be available whenever you need me to be," Harland said. "I have a flexible schedule." Nobody in the room laughed. But Elliot Pike, against the wall, exhaled through his nose in a way that was adjacent to laughing. Dexter Crow was placed on administrative leave on Friday afternoon. No announcement. No meeting. An email from HR, a security escort to collect personal items, a cardboard box in the elevator. Harland was at his desk when it happened. He did not watch. He had no interest in watching. He had done the work. The work was done. What came after was not his to own. What he noticed, what he always noticed in these moments, was the sound the floor made after. The specific silence that follows when something that has been pressing on a room is lifted. People breathe differently. They look at each other differently. The air moves differently. The air moves differently. Simone Achard walked past his workstation at 4:30 and said, without stopping, "Nice work." 2 words. Flat delivery. Professional. The kind of acknowledgement you give someone in a room full of people when you want to say more, but the context won't allow it. Harland said, "Thank you," and turned back to his monitor. Raymond Sutton came down to the 3rd floor that evening after the cleaning crew had come and gone when the building was at its quietest. He stood at Harland's workstation with his hands in his pockets and looked at the grocery bag and the old monitor and the legal pad, now 43 pages, the last two filled in that afternoon. "I owe you an apology," Sutton said. Harland looked up. "For what?" "For not introducing you properly. For letting them." He stopped. "For how you were treated when you came in." Harland considered this for a moment. He thought about the 37 minutes in the waiting room, the comment about the almonds, the old monitor placed with the particular carelessness of someone who has decided that the thing they're placing doesn't require care. He thought about Brianna at the front desk and the way she had said, "Can I help you?" without meaning it. "I appreciate that," he said, "but I want to be honest with you. If they had known who I was when I walked in, I wouldn't have learned what I learned. The work happened because they didn't see me coming." Sutton was quiet for a moment. "That shouldn't be an advantage," he said. That shouldn't be a tool." "No," Harland agreed, "it shouldn't." They sat with that for a moment. Some things are true and uncomfortable to hold, and there's no way to resolve them in a single conversation at the end of a long week, so you hold them and then you set them down, and you keep going. "When can I have your full report?" Sutton asked. "Monday." And after that, Harland picked up the grocery bag. He put the legal pad inside it, and the pens, and the now empty container of almonds. He stood up. "After that, I'll give you a number for your next problem," he said. "And whoever answers will find someone to help." He walked to the elevator. He pressed the button. He waited. The doors opened. He stepped inside. The building hummed around him, the particular frequency of a place that is exhaled. Somewhere below, the city was doing what the city always did. When the lobby doors opened onto the street, the air was cooler than he expected. He stood on the sidewalk for a moment, grocery bag in hand, and looked up at the face of the building he was leaving. 41 years. 2 rooms above a dry cleaner, a phone number, and a reputation. Sometimes the man no one sees coming is the only one who sees everything.